Well, supposedly this live stream is now live. I guess it wasn't a live stream before it was live, was it? At any rate, I'm gonna run a little test to try to make sure that it's working. If there are any gods out there waiting to get in, here I'll post the link to get in here in the um, let's see. I got something getting in my way here. Try that again. Control A, Control C, do a little copy, and paste that into the live chat. So I'll just mark that join the live stream. Especially if you are a god. There we go. Now, I want to try to find this on my telephone and join it in here. So I'm just going to run a quick little test. Okay, there's the video. And if I pop in the earphone from my phone, I should be able to hear myself in there. Yep, with a little bit of lag as expected. And I'm going to click on that live stream link and open that up in Chrome. And give it a moment to log in. And there we go. Entering broadcast studio. And now I'm going to go back to StreamYard on here and add the other me.
Oh, that's right. I've got to face it at me. Otherwise, it's just it was adding the ceiling. Not really useful. So yeah. I'm going to take that back out just to end the echo. But I know it's working now.
So, what should I talk about while I wait for any gods to show up? Well, first off, I suppose the question of why am I inviting gods to my live stream when I'm an atheist and I don't believe there is such a thing as actual gods? Well, theists can be separated into various groups. One common way of grouping them is monotheists and polytheists. Now, most polytheists don't believe in all gods. I guess I think those that do believe in all gods would be what, pantheists or something like that. But then what is even meant by all gods? Because some people just say, well, the universe is a god, or that physics is a god. Well, I believe in the universe. I live in the universe. And I believe in physics. It happens all around me all the time. I wouldn't call it a god. I wouldn't call either one of those things a god. You know, the universe is a separate thing from what generally people describe as gods, and so is physics, a separate thing. So, but here's the thing. Most polytheists don't believe in most gods. Most of the gods that are believed in only by, well, I mean, any of the gods that are believed in by a very small number of the people that exist. In fact, for that matter, there's so many gods believed in that in general, any God that is believed in at all is believed in even by a small number of the people who believe in one or more gods. Now, the monotheists, they figure they've got it lowered down, they've got it reduced down to just one God being real and all the rest of them being imaginary. So they're one step away from my position, and I'm one step away from their position. If their God shows up and speaks for itself, well, then I'll be a theist. That doesn't mean I will necessarily be a monotheist, because just because their God shows up doesn't mean I'm convinced that other gods don't exist as well. But neither would I necessarily be convinced that other gods, well, either way, that they do or that they don't exist. You know, I mean, each one is a separate issue. So why is this important to me? Well, because I live in a world where religion messes up a lot of stuff. And if it's worth all that, I'd like to know. If it's not worth it, then I kind of prefer it just sort of go away. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to tell people that they can't have the religions they have, because they've got their reasons. But if their reasons are bad, I'd like them to know that. So at least they could decide on their own whether or not they want to go on believing things that are likely not true and having bad reasons for their religious beliefs or their religious practices or whatever the case might be. Now, if they've got good reasons, great. And, well, I mean, this is my first episode of this show, so I don't expect anybody really is going to show up. Somebody might. And if they do, it probably won't be a god. But that's okay, because I can have more episodes, hypothetically. We shall see. And maybe give a little more advanced notice. I mean, this one's been up for, I think, at least a few days now, giving people a chance to know that it was coming. And I've posted in a few places for people to, let their gods know that this was coming. So there has been an opportunity. And of course, if an all-knowing God is out there, they'd know anyway. But maybe they want an invitation from somebody who actually believes they exist, as opposed to, from me, because I don't believe they exist. Now, if they showed up here, if they, came and joined this conversation, I wouldn't be convinced that they were a god just because they showed up. And I wouldn't be convinced they were a god just because they claimed they were a god. But I think I could be pretty easily convinced that they exist. Now, being convinced that a god exists would mean I'd have to be convinced that they were a god. And it's probably not too far-fetched to assume that they would know how to do that. But I'm not going to make that assumption. I'm just going to give them the opportunity to show up if they are able to and willing to. And if they want to convince people that they are really a god, they can start with me or any audience that I might get now or in the future. I mean, after all, this is going to be up on YouTube as a recorded video once the live stream's over. At least, if everything goes well. And so other people will be able to watch it later. And if a god has shown up, maybe they'll be convinced by that god that it really is a god. And presumably, they'll probably also be convinced that it exists. Although, I mean, someone could show up pretending to be a god. If they do a good job of fooling people, well, first off, I would like to discourage that. But second off, I would like to encourage everyone to have a healthy level of skepticism with regard to any God claims at all. Because as far as I can tell, we don't have evidence that there is a God or that there isn't a God, and there isn't a lot of consensus on what exactly a God is. So, evidence? Where? What kind? I mean, if it's out there, it's got to be well hidden. Healthy skepticism, and I mean, I'd caution against being overly skeptic. To the point where you can't even be convinced by evidence. But healthy skepticism. So you're not convinced without evidence, and especially not convinced against all evidence. So I wonder, can I contact anybody and let them know that this is going on, and maybe maybe get someone to come and join us? I suppose I can mention on Twitter that I'm live streaming right now. Let's see if I go back here. Well, that didn't work. Can I just grab this? Share. Tweet. Let's see. Join the live stream. Going on now. And the address for joining the live stream. And all gods invited. I'm typing a little slowly here. Episode 1. I hope I got the title right. Yeah, I got it right. And tweet. And there we go. And let's see. I can go and grab the actual link to the video from YouTube. Oh, Amy says hi. Might as well say hi from my phone. She's saying hi in the chat. Now, I don't know if this chat is going to, if the live chat is going to show up in the recorded version or not. It's intended to, but we shall see. There. Saying hi to Amy. Don't know if Amy is still there or left. Should still be there, hypothetically. Oh, Amy says, I just joined, Donald. I'll be watching while I do some cleaning, and we'll see if God joins. Yep, we'll do that. So let's see. I'm gonna close the live stream on my, no, not the live stream, the chat on my phone, so I can get at the share button and tweet that. So there's a tweet for just watching the video. And let's see. Can I also share that on Facebook? Should be able to, I think. I've got an app in my phone it's not the full Facebook app. And sometimes it doesn't seem to want to show up to be able to share. I'm not seeing it right now. Oh, here it is. Found it. So, I don't know. I'm going to go back. Uh-oh. Did I lose? Here. I'm going to go grab the link first, because I don't know if it's actually putting the link in there when I do that on the Facebook thing, Facebook Lite thing. So try to find that again. Here it is. Add to Lite. And now I can paste the link from the clipboard. Just to make sure. And post that. There we go. Yeah, I don't use Facebook a lot. I've got groups, all kinds of groups I've joined in there and stuff, and I check on one or more of them once in a while. Check some of the messages that have been sent to me. Usually miss most of them. Can't keep up. I mean, I don't go in there often enough to see them all. Oh, thanks, Amy. Okay, so yeah, stuff to talk about. Well, again, I don't know how long this thing should be. How long should I let this go on? But the basic idea is, I've asked so many theists to just invite their God to a conversation. I mean, they speak for their God as if their God can't speak for itself, and yet they say it's all powerful, which kind of implies it should be able to speak for itself. So I'll ask them to invite their God to the conversation. They'll say something like, "Well, God's already talking through me." Well, how would I know that? How do I know that's not just a part of their brain talking through them, calling itself a God? I mean, maybe that's all a God is. Just something imaginary that talks to you through your own brain. But that's not the way they tend to describe their God. They tend to describe their God as something that can actually do stuff other than, just influence their thoughts. Now, there are people who believe in gods that only do stuff through people. I don't think of that concept as being a god. I think of that as being a society. Societies do things through people. Societies are, multi-organism entities, like human societies, for example, or an ant society. If you can call that a society, they do socialize. They're social animals, just like we humans are. Very different sort. Nonetheless, it's something that has been called a super organism, just as we humans are kind of a super cell. That we're above and beyond the single cell, that we're multiple cells, and not just us. Worms fit that description as well. I mean, might say we're higher on the food chain, so to speak. Although generally speaking, I think most humans try to avoid eating worms. So there's that. But yeah. But we eat other stuff that eats worms. So, like fish and birds, like chickens, for example. Very well-known bird that humans tend to eat. Oh, yeah. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Is that really an issue with some people still? because we know what bird chickens evolved from, and it was an egg-laying bird that wasn't a chicken. That's how evolution works. It's not that something evolves out of being what it is. It's that it evolves into being something that it wasn't and continues to be what it was. Like we humans, for example, our ancestors evolved into being humans. They did not evolve out of being apes. We're still apes. And the ancestors of apes evolved into being apes. They didn't evolve out of being mammals. They're still mammals. And the ancestors of mammals evolved into being mammals. They didn't evolve out of being vertebrates. They're still vertebrates, and quadrupeds for that matter. And the ancestors of vertebrates evolved into being vertebrates. They didn't evolve out of being eukaryotes. All vertebrates are still eukaryotes. But plants are also eukaryotes. The ancestors of plants evolved into being plants. They didn't evolve out of being eukaryotes. So, what did the gods people believe in evolve out of? Well, if they're real, then you'd think they would have evolved out of their ancestors. That would make sense. But then some people say that, their God is eternal. It's always been there. Well, if it's eternal, if it goes back forever in time, then how could it have ever had an ancestor? Where is the opportunity for that God to evolve? It's almost like expecting a highly complex, living, thinking organism to just poof into existence literally in no time at all before there's a such thing as time. Except, they don't tend to view it that way. They tend to view it more like it's just something that always was. But why would something always be that has features like a human being, but no ancestors? No reason for having those features. I mean, we're talking about depends on which theology, but I mean, at least in some cases, we're talking about a God that lived with nothing around them, no food to eat, therefore no need to eat food, no reason to have a digestive system, no one to communicate with, no reason to have a face or a mouth or anything like that. I mean, no reason to have anything, really. No reason to have arms or legs or a butt or eyes, ears, nose, hair. I mean, God is, at least the most common depictions of gods I've seen are generally depicted with hair. Now, it's an artist impression, sure. And there are bald gods out there as well. They're a little more rare, but some people do draw bald characters that they intend to be their idea of what God looks like. A gender, that's another thing. Why would a God have a gender? I mean, the very definition of what a gender is, it's a type of something. In order for a God to have a gender, there would have to be more than one kind of God. Otherwise, the gender concept wouldn't make any sense. Now, you could say maybe God didn't have a gender until genders existed, and genders didn't exist until God made humans. But then that wouldn't fit the stories either, because, well, most of the stories that I know of anyway usually have animals coming before humans, and the animals had genders, and plants coming before humans and often before animals. And the plants also have genders of a sort. They come in various genders, actually. But I think, well, flowering plants, for example, tend to have generally at least male and female in the same organism. Uh, is that, hermaphroditic? I suppose you could call it that. um, but there's, yeah, there's angiosperms and things like that. Is the plants come in a pretty big variety, and fungus. Oh yeah, all kinds of genders in that sort of a life form. But a god, if there was only one of them, would having a gender make any sense at all? I'm thinking no, probably not. Um, so then, why, if God was going to create us in His image, if a God was going to create us humans in His image, its image, why would we be given genders? Because that wouldn't make sense either. Any rate, any gods out there? Still waiting for one of them to join. Let's see. Here's the link to join. All gods invited. There we go. Posted that in the live chat. And yeah. Where else can I go? How about Discord? Let's see. Maybe I can find someone on Discord that might be interested in knowing this is going on. I could send a picture. Let's see. Camera. Let's see. Take that picture. Let's see. Should I do it from that? That's the StreamYard one. Or over here. Oh, now I'm going to have an echo. Let's see. Should I do it from that? That's the StreamYard one. Or over here. Oh, now I'm going to have an echo. Let's see. Should I do it from that? That's the StreamYard one. Okay. Or over here. Oh, now I'm going to have an echo. Get a picture of that? That's the StreamYard one. Okay. Or over here. Oh, now I'm going to have an echo. Get a picture of that? That's the StreamYard one. Oh yeah, I better stop this thing. At least mute it. Here, I'll just close that window. I don't need that one. And I'm going to go back to the StreamYard. Or back to Discord, I mean. And let's see. It wants me to, my phone wants me to give permission before I can post an image on StreamYards on Discord. So do that. And let's see. And what am I going to say in here? Still waiting for any gods to show up and join my live stream. Period. Send. Okay. And let's see. Can I show that on there? That's what was on there before. Somebody sent that, and it's uploading mine. Is it done yet? There it is. And there's the image. It's just a picture. There's no video. And just above the picture, there's the text. So yeah, trying to get the word out there for any gods that want to join. I mean, I don't necessarily have to put the link on everything, because after all, I mean, if I wanted God to join, they hypothetically, they should know where this is at, right? Unless we're not talking about an all-knowing God. And if we're not talking about an all-knowing God, well, then that's a whole different story. But I have put the link out there in a few places as well. So, I mean, I thought about just not sharing the link at all. I could have just done this. And, you know, I mean, I could have, for that matter, I could have, pre-recorded it and not broadcast it, and just left the link for only me to know, and went, hey, if any gods out there want to join, the address, right? Well, except what fun would that be? Because actually I've done enough experiments in the past to know pretty much how that would likely go. And yeah, so I'm going to make a series out of this. At least that's the intention. And run at least a half hour or an hour per episode, maybe longer, depending how interesting or boring things turn out to be. I don't know how often I'm going to run them. I thought about doing like once every 8 days. Anybody want to give any suggestions? Feel free. I might just do them sporadically. Again, if the idea is to get gods to come on and speak for themselves, if we're talking about all-knowing gods, they should be able to figure out, when my live stream is happening, hypothetically. And if there are gods out there and they're not all-knowing, and maybe all this hyped up all-knowing, all-powerful nonsense is just stuff that people threw in there, like a contest, like, oh, my god's more powerful than your god. Well, it can't be, because my god is all powerful. My god is like the ultimate power. Well, sure. I mean, I can see that kind of thing happening. But if there's anybody who watches this, who that's the kind of God they believe in, then I would encourage them to ask their God to show up, because I've already made the invitation, and apparently that limitless God, that all-powerful, all-knowing God, either doesn't have the power to join, or doesn't know, or doesn't want people to know it exists. And there's another question, because why would a God who so many people believe wants people to believe it exists want atheists to continue not believing it exists? I mean, why would it hide from the very people who don't believe it exists, and only show itself to the people who already do believe it exists if it wants people to believe it exists? That seems kind of senseless. And one possibility that enters my mind is maybe it's not what it makes itself out to be. Maybe it's not all powerful. Maybe it's not all knowing. Maybe it's not good. Maybe it is all knowing and it is all powerful, but it's evil, and it has the power to deceive us into thinking it's good, but gives us free will, so we can choose to believe what the evidence tells us instead. And so then, rather than letting people believe that it's evil and exists, maybe it's choosing to let people either believe that it's evil or that it exists. So if you're convinced that it's good, even though, the Bible really makes it out to be a complete piece of crap, then you're allowed to believe in it. I mean, I don't know. I don't make the rules. I'm just hypothesizing. What are the possibilities? Why would an all-knowing, all-powerful God choose to hide itself? I mean, I've invited that God to show up. Obviously, I'm not saying, I don't want to know if it exists, because why would I make the invitation for it to show up if I don't want to know the truth? That would be kind of silly. Now, I suppose somebody might think, well, maybe I did it to try to convince people who believe in a God that their God isn't real, even though it is. Well, why would I think that would work if I believed it was real? If I really thought there was a possibility their God might be real, and I'm trying to convince them it's not real, inviting their God to come speak for itself would be a really stupid thing for me to do, because that would just blow that plan out of the water. I mean, after all their God would have to do then is just show up. And that would answer that question. Speaking of which, no gods have shown up yet. Anybody else want to join? Somebody got something to say? Feel free. Not that I'm expecting anybody is actually hearing me ask that question. Well, Amy might still be there. Oh, she said be right back. Don't know. Oh, what is this? Take a look here. Atheistic J in the lobby in ACA Discord says, I always wonder if people in the future will argue if Spider-Man existed or not. I'm just gonna type in probably. Because somebody probably will. If humanity doesn't wipe itself out first. I might as well add that. Yeah. Let's see. I still have the YouTube link. Oh, it might still be in the clipboard. Oh yeah. Let's see. Here's the link in case you're interested. And send. So yeah, it's been over a half hour, 40 minutes I think, since I started this live stream. And still just me in here. There was two of me for a while, but yeah, still just me. Let's see. Can I bring that other one back for a moment? Yep, still just two people. Got 5 likes, but it says only 2 are watching. If that number is correct, then that's all there is. So, yeah. Had a debate with Kent Hovind recently on whether or not evolution is ubiquitous. That was interesting. I mean, basically all he did was preach, but he did concede in his opening statement, so that was interesting. I suppose he figured, get microevolution out of the way and just concede that microevolution exists, and then pretend that evolution doesn't exist. So he admitted in his opening statement that microevolution is ubiquitous. And I thanked him for conceding and said, let's have this conversation anyway. But I mean, to go on from there and then try to say that evolution itself isn't ubiquitous, it's kind of like saying that there are Ford Pintos on roads everywhere, but there's no such thing as an automobile. Cars don't exist, but red cars are everywhere. Yeah, just, I mean, it's a subset. Microevolution is a subset. To say that microevolution is ubiquitous and evolution isn't is like saying small plants are ubiquitous, but plants aren't. I mean, well, I don't have any small plants growing in my apartment, unless you count microscopic ones. I don't have a microscope to check, but there probably are some things in here that count as microscopic plants, maybe, or microscopic fungi. I mean, microscopic life forms, I should say, are pretty ubiquitous. So maybe I should have used that as the example. It's like saying that micro life is ubiquitous and macro life, can never be achieved. There's no such thing as macro life. And worse yet, saying that micro life is ubiquitous and life isn't. No. Well, again, life is ubiquitous on Earth, pretty much ubiquitous on Earth. On Earth. You go in Earth, not so much. I mean, the molten core probably doesn't have much, if any, life growing in it. The vacuum of space, also not likely an awful lot of life living unprotected in the vacuum. Now, I say unprotected because, hey, our cells are actually protected life in a sense. Each cell in our body carries an ancestral environment with it that it produces and maintains throughout its lifetime. It's called homeostasis. And so we humans are a composite of a bunch of things that have their own protected environment. But we as a whole also need some sort of a protection in order to survive in the vacuum of space. And there are life forms that can handle that pretty decently, like the tardigrade, for example. How long, how well, I'm not really sure, but yeah, life in our universe, not so ubiquitous. Our universe is not fine-tuned for life, by the way. Anybody who thinks it is, first off, they're probably not understanding the concept of what a universe is or what life is. Because, I mean, you have to have a universe to have life. Life is a thing. The universe is like everything. So you can't have a thing without having an everything. But also, a universe being fine-tuned for life would sort of imply that there was life without a universe, that there was a something before there was an everything. Even if the only thing that was a God, that would have been a something, and if it was the only thing, it would have been everything. So there would have still been a universe. And then we're back to, what about people who say the universe is God? Okay, well, Did the universe walk with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden? Walk on feet and talk with them? I mean, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to me that everything would be descending from the sky and walking with them in the garden. Or that everything would say, let there be light, and then there'd be light, because why would everything talk? I mean, okay, I'm not trying to make something out to be ridiculous. It does that well enough on its own. If I push myself to see where somebody could make some sense of it, I can kind of see, some possibilities. Like, for example, I talk. It's not every one of my cells talking, but it's me talking, and I am made of all of my cells. So there's that. But see, I'm a human. We all know humans exist because, probably everybody watching this, which, well, right now is only 2 people, but probably everybody who watches this recorded also will likely be human. And sure, maybe, some other life form from another planet or another galaxy, or that actually evolved in outer space somehow, might someday see this. But I wouldn't say the odds are all that terribly high. So there's a pretty good chance only humans are going to ever be watching this. And, and at least an even slightly higher chance that everything that ever watches this will have some idea what a human is. Will know from experience that humans exist. So, why should we believe that a God exists? We have no experience of God's existing. That's not something that we can just, say, well, sure, this God exists because, it seems likely enough. I mean, after all, there are lots of other gods, right? Yeah, well, there are lots of gods in stories. Not very many people believe most of those stories. And here's another question. There are stories about me. Not all of those stories are true. So how could we know if there is a God that's out there, whether or not all the stories about that God are true? I mean, the Bible makes out Satan to be a deceiver. That's a character in the Bible. Well, if there is a deceiver involved, then couldn't there be stories that are deceptive? There were human beings involved in putting the Bible together out of old writings. Couldn't the deceiver have gotten involved and said, hey, let's leave out, this book because it tells too much of the truth, and put in this other one here instead that tells a few lies? Isn't it even possible that the character that is the deceiver in the story might not have been the one who was really doing the deceiving? Maybe the story was written by friends of the one who really did the deceiving, and made the deceiver out to be the one not deceiving. I don't know. I mean, this is all conjecture, and well, of course, if we can get any gods to actually come on this program and speak for themselves, then they can give us their take on such things. And that's part of the idea behind, inviting gods to speak for themselves. If they won't, of course, this program is probably going to be kind of boring unless somebody else maybe comes on and speaks on their God's behalf, and they're welcome to do that. But I'd kind of like to keep that somewhat limited, make sure that the gods can get in. I mean, if it starts getting crowded in here and I don't have room to add one more person, and then a god shows up, what am I going to do? Ask somebody to leave? I suppose I could, but probably not likely to come to that. Any rate, but we've got plenty of people out there speaking on behalf of one God or another. I would prefer their God speak on their behalf instead. I mean, after all, if their God is all-knowing, their God knows more about them than they do. So, who should really be doing the talking for whom? I think it's a fair question. Any rate, coming up on an hour here pretty soon. Got like 9 more minutes left, I think, before I get to the hour. So, if nobody comes along and wants to join in and say something, I think I'll call it quits pretty soon. And I don't have a scheduled time picked out to say when the next episode would be. I started this one at 10:25 Pacific time, U.S. Pacific time, on a Monday, March 1st, and 2021. And the 10:25 was picked on purpose, by the way. That actually means something. Some people will know what it means. Some people will have, a different meaning than the one I had intended from it, or the one that I thought of when I picked that particular time. But yeah. So I might pick the same time again, and I might not. We'll see. Communication. It's an important thing. If a God wants us to know it exists, they should care about how that gets communicated. An old book that seems to be self-inconsistent is probably not the best method they could have picked. Especially one that has to be translated in order for people to understand it. And, if you're going by the Bible, according to that book, the reason why it ended up having to be translated is because the God in that book supposedly messed up all the languages. So, yeah, not the smartest thing to do. If you want to communicate with people, if you want people to believe you exist, if you want people to, obey your commands, or whatever the case might be, communicating clearly with them is probably a good first step. Making it impossible to communicate clearly with them is probably not a good step to have anywhere along the way in the process. I get it. The Bible's God was upset that people were building a multi-story tower out of mud bricks. Strangely, doesn't seem to mind all the multi-story towers out there built out of steel and glass and such things these days. Considering his aversion to iron chariots, I think maybe he might not have liked the whole steel idea, but, there it is. Steel, concrete, glass, plastics, all kinds of materials, and we're building skyscrapers a lot taller than the mud brick building that Yahweh got all upset over. But the archaeological evidence indicates that story is just purely a myth. I mean, I say purely, there's no indication that it's anything other than a myth that I know of. However, there is some possibility that, there might have been a little bit of truth to it. Maybe when people got together and cooperated and tried to build something big, that caused some linguistic diversification. But that wouldn't be a God scrambling up the one and only language that humanity had. That would just be language evolution. which we see still happening around us now. We should take more control over it and, take an intentionally active part in it, not only in bringing about changes that would be beneficial, but also in resisting or rejecting changes that would prove detrimental. But that's a very in-depth discussion waiting to happen, and something that would have been published in my planned book, which is now likely never to come out because apparently my publisher no longer exists. That's something I've seen happen a lot. Companies come and go, and invest in something, and next thing you know, it isn't there anymore. And maybe that's what happened with the whole God thing. Maybe there was something to the whole God story. Aliens visiting from outer space, maybe. Kind of unlikely, it seems, but not impossible. More likely, probably just humans. Maybe, just humans that were slightly more advanced in some way than other humans. And, maybe they did set up some sort of a garden, an experiment, something, and tried to raise some humans to be subservient to them, and found instead that they had produced humans who didn't want to be subservient, and let them go free. Maybe that's us. But again, it's conjecture at this point. We don't know. We know there are stories, and there's the reality we're living in. And how much those stories actually depict some past of this reality, it's kind of hard to tell. But the evidence seems to indicate that it's more fiction than fact. And any work of fact, any factual documentation with fiction inserted into it becomes a work of fiction, because as soon as you insert even a little fiction into it, I mean, sure, you can say it's based on a true story, but it's still a work of fiction, because as soon as you've inserted any fiction into it, as soon as you can say, we didn't do everything we could to keep this all factual, it can't be trusted to be factual, because it's not entirely. And I mean, sure, you can make something that's intended to be a work of fact that has some mistakes in it, some errors. That's a whole different story. But lots of the Bible is believed by people who believe the Bible to be true, to be allegorical. There are people who say they believe the Bible literally, who still say that some parts of the Bible are allegories or just stories, fables, parables, different types of works of fiction mixed into this thing that they say is all fact. Well, if there's a work of fiction that is a part of that supposed nothing but fact, then it's not nothing but fact. It is then fact that contains fiction. Which is sort of like if I make the statement, this episode is not going to end soon, and then say that, the word not was the only untrue part of that statement, so therefore it's a true statement. That would be an error, because it is going to end soon. And the word not does make a difference. You insert something into a, into a particular compilation of information, and it changes that compilation of information. A factual story with fiction in it isn't factual anymore. It's just partially factual. And every work of fiction is at least partially factual, because we humans don't know how to do otherwise. We really don't. We haven't come up with a way to make works of fiction that aren't in some sense based at least partially on the reality that we know, because we have to make use of concepts that we can understand in order to make a story that somebody else is going to be able to understand, at least at some reasonable level. Concepts like communication, like physics, like gravity or electricity, shapes, things, objects, animals, life forms, plants, computations. These are all things that we know from reality. And even the stuff that we know of that's not, or is apparently not part of reality, like magic, for example, we know them from reality, from for example, things that we couldn't understand, and so we called them magic because we didn't know, what else to call them. It doesn't mean they weren't anything real. They might well have not been what they seem to be. And now when we label something as magic, it's usually a magic trick. But it could also be just technology that is over our heads. That, we look at it and say, wow, that's magic. We probably pretty much mean it's like magic. Or when people say something like, love is magical. Well, is it really? Or is it more of, electrochemical? Because, that's not magic. Although it might seem like magic, and that's understandable. And when we make statements about, what we think things are, we're being honest. It's not dishonest to say what you think something is, even if you're wrong. It's dishonest to say that it is what you know it's not. And if somebody knows their God isn't real and they're going around telling people their God is real, or if they even think their God probably isn't real, but they're going around saying their God is real because, Pascal's wager, that they're afraid if their God is real, it's going to torture them for all of eternity. And they figure if it's not real, then they got nothing to lose by lying about it. Well, I got news for them. They do have something to lose by lying about it. Their integrity. Thanks for watching.